don't have the, oh, there it is. Yep. All good.
Okie dokie.
I'll text Tina too and just see.
We are live now.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
So Tina's Wi-Fi is still unstable.
Ken is coming in right now.
Oh, good. Okay, good. Well, once Ken comes in, then we can start. And then if Tina's able to join us, it sounds like it's still unstable. It keeps crashing when she logs in, she said. Hey, Ken.
Hi, and I can't believe Tina's trying to use my excuse. Bad Wi-Fi connections is me.
That's right. Well, since we have a quorum, I will call to order the Board of Education Policy Committee meeting of September 20th. We have a few things on our agenda. These are all actually things that were tabled back in, I think the last time we met was June, right?
Maybe.
All right. So the first, I guess, Dr. DeSantis, you are up. We will get these ones pushed through.
Yes, I've been waiting very long and very excited to get these very old policies updated. I'm going to just share my screen for a moment. I feel it might be easier to just kind of go through. There's nothing too big I want to change in some of these policies, but I want just people to get kind of context of where I'm coming from with these ideas. Can everyone see my screen?
Okay.
All right,
So
great.
We're using this first one. We're using the CABE recommended, right?
The first one we're using the CABE recommendation.
Great.
It is, again, unlike the other policies, which are, almost 20 years old, some of them, this is a very modern policy. I did make some suggestions to some lines in the policy. The first one is all communications and information accessible via the network should be assumed to be private. I want to add within that somewhere that says between members within the network, because once somebody starts sharing stuff outside of the network, that kind of idea of privacy within the network is lost. I just kind of want to put that little extra bit of information in there. Because when you start emailing, and we shouldn't be doing certain private information outward, but I just kind of want to make that as clear as possible that anything within our network stays, we'd like to keep it within our network.
So you want to say like all communications and information between members of the network accessible?
Should be assumed to be private, yes. Oh, Ken.
To your point that you just made, should we then clarify what that means? It's private. I think you said it, that what's on the network should stay on the network and not be shared off of the network or outside of the network.
Yeah, actually, we could put something in there. That would be, I'll put a note in there. But yeah, you're right. It's
should be assumed to be private and remain on the network.
Yes.
Or within the network, I'm sorry. And I think I need the preposition.
Yeah, I'll put that in there for my update. Any other questions on my question with number 3?
So number 3, then we'll just for clarity, we'll read all communications and information between members of the network and accessible via the network should be assumed to be private and remain within the network.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Perfect. All right. The next one that jumped out, all of them are pretty straightforward. The one that I didn't know if you guys wanted to give input on was number 5, where it says use of telecommunication opportunities for commercial purposes, financial gain, product advertisement, political lobbying, or attempt to disrupt the service. I think that was pretty clear. Like, you shouldn't use devices to disrupt the services within the school. I just don't, this kind of falls into that weird gray area of like, what does it mean to have financial gain if like a teacher is receiving emails to maybe set up a tutoring event? I think we know, like, if someone's clearly politically lobbying. I just didn't know if anyone had a suggestion for this to either clean it up a little bit. We could leave it as is. If there's
Yeah,
any
Ken.
insight.
Ken?
Yeah. Marcus.
My only comment really is there should be a comma between purposes and financial gain and financial.
Yes, I did put that in there, actually. I noticed that when I looked at that.
Oh, what you have on the screen is really tiny. So if you had that, I apologize.
Oh, I'm so sorry.
missed
Yeah, I go up to 200%. There we go. All right, that was it. I just wanted to make sure that people knew. I mean, again, that this is a little more for interpretation. Last but not least, that down here where it says guidelines for students, they have a very particular, like, read, sign, obtain a signature. We do things digitally through PowerSchool. And I kind of want to just replace this with consult with your school's corresponding handbook. Because to do all this, they have to sign the handbook and do the whole deal. So a lot of this stuff is already kind of built into our handbook process. So if I could remove this and just replace it with, sign up using the handbook. Ken? Yeah.
What I also like about that is that anytime we want to change the requirement, the guidelines, we just change the handbook and we don't have to change the policy.
Exactly. I thought about that because how crazy COVID is. All the rules last year are different this year, and who knows? We always want to be flexible. So by, again, you'll see, I'll do this in the next policy. It kind of gives us the flexibility within the policy.
I agree with that. Nora, did you have any comments on that? No.
No, not on that. I did have one on the first page, but I'm not sure if, when it's time to just talk about that.
Well, those are my suggestions for this policy. So if you guys have any other suggestions for this policy, let me know.
Or did you want Wes to scooch up back to the first page?
Yeah.
There
So
we
on
go.
the first page, and maybe Wes, you already changed this. I couldn't quite see, but in number 1 for guidelines for general use, I think that all use of the internet, electronic services, or any telecommunications network should there be an in there?
Oh, yeah.
Which one is this?
Or it must take out the B. If you take out the B,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, either way. Or must support, and then you'd have to take out of.
Right.
So it must be in support of or must support educational.
services. So all use of the internet, electronic services, or I'll put a comma there, or any Yes, I know. I'm a comma guy too. Yeah, I need those pauses. Or any telecommunications network must support educational objectives or research. There we go.
Perfect.
Much cleaner, much nicer.
I did have a question about that though. I'm sorry, Nora.
No.
So can students, especially at the high school, I guess this is more relevant to the high school, they use the Wi-Fi?
Yes.
Are they able to access their personal Facebook or Instagram or Snapchat, whatever, between classes?
Yeah, we allow a certain level, especially at the high school level, of networking. So I believe we do allow
technically, wouldn't that
Facebook.
be a violation of this policy as written?
Actually, it could. Yeah, if you look at it, interpret it. I mean, anything that you access outside. I mean, if a kid just wanted to see what the sports score was,
Right.
then this violates it.
Right.
Well, is that, let me just be clear, Wes, is that if they're using our server, if they're on their phone and using their own network provider?
But most of them are on our network and we opted for that because the cell coverage is so bad in the area that most of them do use our networks. We kind of opt rather than use our network just because for safety concerns, they can always be connected.
Can you bring up a good point on that?
Well, to be
Yeah.
clear, I support that. I
Yeah.
support our stance on it. I just don't want us to create a policy that they're automatically going to be in violation of.
Yeah.
Could we add something like as permissible, or just as a sort of a catch-all for?
Yeah, I will. We might even throw in the handbook in that too, like behaviors and or like traffic. Yes, yeah, I think we can clean that up. But you're right. Yeah, if you know, when you look at it like that, it's yeah, it's like anything that is outside of an educational realm is seen within violation of the policy.
Right.
Second one makes sense. You know, only the owner of the email should operate the email. Fourth one is pretty straightforward. Don't use our equipment for illegal activities. We already went through 5. Number 6 is great because it says, like, you know, we can't control the information going through. We're going to try our best. And violations provision stated. All right, so we'll modify the first one and kind of put in as permissible or something along those lines in there.
Yeah. Yep.
All right. Any other questions on this policy?
On number 6, Wes, where
Yes.
we do, you know, it's our sort of our disclaimer on that. Do we need to, or should we mention that we take all, that we take steps to prevent that? However, nothing is infallible, or
Do we want it in a policy to say
I
that?
don't know. Yeah, that's the question.
Yeah.
I think if anything, it might, I'm not really even sure it belongs in a regulation. I think it's,
Okay.
I get
Just
what you're
great.
saying, Ken. I'm like on the fence. I don't know if I want to say that we're gonna. I mean,
Right,
we're
I
trying.
Yeah.
We block things out. We have filters. We have, you know, I
Yeah.
can't stop a kid using like a VPN service and stuff like that. So,
Okay, we can leave it.
yeah.
I was okay with it. It was more of a thought than a concern.
So it sounds like we can have this one go to the full board for our next Board of Education meeting with the changes, and Wes, you'll come up with some kind of language for that number 1.
Yep.
Just talked about. Okay. But yeah, sounds like this can go to full board then.
Perfect. Great. All right. So on to the second one. Here. There we go. Again, this one is replacing, this is a shipment and good one policy. This one is replacing an older, much older policy. The first area that I highlighted is privately owned technology devices may not be used during instructional time. I want to, again, replace the privately owned technology devices may only be used as advised in the student handbook, because we have many different scenarios where kids are using private devices at the different school levels and everything. This way, we leave it into the handbook. So, because our handbook has all the rules and regulations that changes yearly.
What I like about that too is everybody has to sign off on the handbook also.
Right.
Exactly.
Affirmative, yeah.
Oh,
Yes, Ken.
and this actually, I just thought of it, but it might apply to the policy before. Do we need to specify the current year's handbook?
Oh, yes. We can put that in there. Let me put that note in there. That's actually a very good idea. Oops. And I'll do that with this one.
Wes, I don't know that it matters, but I feel like Blackberries is not spelled that way. I don't know that anyone actually has one that they could tell us how to spell it, but I don't think it's actually like a
Yeah.
Blackberry.
like I think it's BURY. I think.
Yeah, I just don't think it's that way.
Yeah.
That doesn't look right either, but
Yeah.
And it's past tense. I think it's blackberried.
Yeah. Right.
URIED.
Yeah.
Touche.
Well, I think that the I in iPhones is not capitalized, right? And I don't think there's a hyphen there.
That's true.
No hyphen. It's not capital.
Yeah.
Good catch.
Kindles, Nooks, cellular telephones. I think that's how my grandma would say it. I will look at that. So my next comment that I had, again, all these bullet points are pretty straightforward. The old policy was super granular, and we don't like that. The shipment goodwill policy, I actually liked it over the newer K policy, because it just says, like, don't use our technology to, harass and threaten people. Don't use it to unauthorized technology use, damage, yada yada yada. But the one I had I wanted to know if we can add a little thing to it, where accessing or attempting to access any material that is obscene as to minors, or contains pornography. I want to put willingly in front of that, because we've had situations where people have gone into things that they shouldn't have unwillingly because of just happenstance. I want the policy to reflect that you're willingly doing this. I've had some poor teachers, accidentally go into things and they're like, whoa, what is this? And they had no need to do it. Ken?
I prefer intentionally there.
Oh.
To willingly. Only because they could have willingly been searching a particular term, and it just happened that that term pulls up something obscene.
Mm-hmm.
All right, there we go. All right, and right here, they have an optional section, access to board technology resources. And this one here it's basically just saying, like, you can use your privately owned device to access our network and our servers, which is what we already do. And then right here at this bottom part, where it says students must abide by all procedures outlined by this policy and in the current student year handbook. So to replace all that with just the current year handbook, clean it up. But we'd keep this, and we get rid of course, this optional section, because we're keeping it because we have our students use their own devices. I just said I like this because finally we have a policy that says, like, don't use your privately owned technology to harm and vandalize the district's devices.
And I like the bold reminder in that section also.
Yeah. It's like, don't do this.
Well, because we can watch you, and we know that you're doing it when you do it. And
yeah.
Is that also in the handbook?
Yes.
Okay.
We have a whole good section in the handbook that talks about, like, no expectation of privacy. If you're on our network, we know, and if you're using your own device, then at that point we can come see your device at any time. If you're on, so there's a whole rigmarole in there about it. Awesome.
Sure, I'm clear. So you said that whole, what was optional, we're saying we should include that. And then we had that slight little addition of some language in paragraph 4 about in the current year's handbook.
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
So any input or ideas or changes any of you would like to make this policy?
Did you have any comments on the harm to board technology resources? I just saw that's highlighted.
Oh, that was I unhighlighted. I liked it because it's the first, we never really talked about that in any of our previous policies. I just put that this is good. The fact that we are kind of living in an age now where there are devices out there that someone can bring in that can harm the network, it can harm Wi-Fi routers. They have USB things that could do things. So this just really lays it out there that says, like, you cannot even use a device that is intentionally harmful to the.
Well, that was going to be my question. Can we add intentional in there?
Yeah.
Any intentional act by a student?
Yeah, intentionally harms.
Or yeah, that intentionally harms. I'm sorry, that's the better place. Yeah. I could see an accidental introduction of a virus or something that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that intentionally harms the board. There we go.
It would be terrible.
Yes.
But innocent memo.
Yeah, we don't want to say too much. We don't want to give any ideas. We got to. But all right, intention. Any other?
I don't have any, nor did you.
No,
All
All
right.
right. I will make these changes and email it to Susie and company, and then they can send it out to all of you, and then it'll go for the full board review.
Excellent.
Thanks, Wes.
Oh, I'm so
Wes,
good. It's all
Made
done.
it through.
I made it through.
There's probably more somewhere, Wes.
Oh, I'm
Oh,
sure.
oh, there's more, but no.
The low hanging fruit.
Yes, exactly. Absolutely.
All right, Wes, thank you. Have a good night.
You too. Thank you, everyone. Have a good one.
Have a good one.
All right. Bye.
All right. Moving along, that's good. This next one is truancy. And this one's been, I think, well, it's been since 2011, but it came up, Shipman said we had to update it, Cabe said we had to update it. So, but the update, I don't think you guys do you guys have the red line version? I don't think so.
I have well, it's not redlined actually, but I have the current and then the new version.
Okay. Yeah, really the only differences are, because I did redline it, is that second paragraph that starts, in addition, the board takes seriously the issue of chronic absenteeism. That's the addition to our current policy.
Yeah, it's a little odd because it basically repeats.
I
right.
know. It's odd, right? I wondered that too, but
For a while, Margaret, I thought it was a mistake that we actually had this policy because it's really not that different other than the title that
Yep.
addresses chronic absenteeism, right?
yep.
And that second paragraph, I mean, I don't know that we need to wordsmith it, but
I actually wonder if it needs, like, does it need to have the information that details what happens after a certain number of tardies or absences?
well,
Or,
that's
I mean, I understand that's in the state
it's in
law,
the
but
state law and it changes, Nora. So for
Oh.
example, this year, we don't have the implications, but there is new legislation that allows, we haven't talked about this at the board level yet, but allows for students to have 2 mental health days. I know that's a shocker, but I don't know who was at the wheel on that one, but there's 2 mental health days with no other information on what that means. So that's where I mean, asleep at the wheel, because all we've heard is that students will have access to 2 mental health days, but how do they evidence that? What's our follow-up if a student needs that? But I don't know what the implications of that will be on attendance or our current truancy law. Does that count as excused or unexcused? Does it count towards the 9, not the 9? So I think there's more to come, and that's why they avoid including what that limitation is.
okay.
That
They
might be
should
more.
it's my opinion, Dr. De Silva, but they should schedule those so that all students can avail themselves, and teachers for that matter, of these wellness days.
Right before April break.
That's all I'm
possibly.
saying. First day before break and first day after break.
And, not to suggest that at some point we shouldn't be considering what that actually means, but it was like in the air.
Yeah,
And that's all we received was that legislation says students will have access to 2 mental health days. And that's it. So
Well, that's like something that may not even come out of committee or even go up for a vote. Right?
and I think
Or does it pass it?
it passed.
I think it
Oh,
passed.
oh,
Yeah, I
okay,
think
okay.
it passed.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's done. They passed it. Again, I don't know who was there and what details will come, but that's all we know as of now. If we wanted to clean this up a little bit so it wasn't repetitive,
Mhm.
I suppose we could put that in addition line up. And then you wouldn't need to repeat will adopt and maintain procedures to implement this policy.
Oh, right. So,
But maybe it's different. So maybe the reason it's perhaps separated out is because chronic absenteeism we have to have procedures related to state law, where the other one's talking about to assist parents. I don't know, just feels a little bit repetitive.
I agree, it feels repetitive. Yeah, I don't know why they structured it as is. The other big changes, and they're actually the real big change in this, was all the legal references. So there
Yes.
must have been a lot of changes in laws that happened. So I don't know, I always just get a little nervous if it's such a legally like kind of mandated policy shifting. unless we know.
Shifting it? Okay.
I don't
So we
know.
can- I wouldn't have any other recommendations then in this case.
I actually don't like that we're only concerned with chronic absenteeism. I don't like any absenteeism. I take that very seriously. But like you said, it's maybe because of the legal language we're required to separate it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Nora.
And I think also, Ken, there's the reason in which it is separated or just distinguished this way is that chronic absenteeism actually has a definition. Whereas student attend, if a child is out of school, and we know why they're out of school, which we should know why they're out of school, is different how they define it than the chronic, and it's a consistent problem, and it's unexcused, and there isn't a justifiable reason why that is. So I do think that there's a bit of a difference.
Okay. Anything? All right, so we can have this one go in front of the board as well. Oh, now on to the
30-page.
the paperweight.
Yeah. So Margaret, I had an initial question. In my version, the student discipline portion is redlined, the narrative.
Yep.
Was that intentionally removed?
Yeah, well, so that's something to talk about actually. So two things is 5144, which is one of our current policies. When we looked, because we were looking at like the fact that the discipline policy needed to be updated, we saw this and we're like, oh, CABE doesn't have it anymore in their model policy packet, nor does Shipman and Goodwin. So at some point, what we had adopted as 5144 got sunsetted got put out to pasture by both CABE and by Shipman. So one recommendation is to say that we should probably delete our 5144, which is also kind of an aspirational kind of policy. And then the second thing is then updating 5114, but based more on the Shipman and Goodwin model policy, which had a lot of legal changes that I think we just needed to update. And part of that is that the lead-in paragraph is not a part of Shipman's model policy. Now we can talk about whether we want to keep it or not because it was in ours. But if we're going with a strictly Shipman policy, then we would take that out.
So there's no lead in at all then with Shipman's model policy?
Shipman's policy, there is no lead and it goes straight to definitions. And I wasn't sure originally, I thought maybe we should leave the lead in, but then I just didn't know because this is so dense and there is so much about all this, I just didn't know if there might be something in that lead in that gets contradicted later on. Because the lead in is from CABE versus the policy is from Shipman. I don't know, but that was a topic for conversation with everybody. For instance, that first, like if we were to keep that second paragraph where it says any pupil whose conduct on school grounds or at a school sponsored activity violates the publicized policy of the board or seriously disrupts the educational process or endangers persons or properties may be expelled. I think that
Yeah, on page 4, they talk about the conduct on school grounds.
right.
Right, so I think you're right that it could be contradicted later because it kind of outlines it.
Right.
So
Well, Sorry,
What are they
Because I
defining
think
term-
one of the changes, one of the changes that Shipman is putting in here is that there's an and in there. It's got to violate a publicized policy of the board and disrupt the educational process. That's what comes later on in the Shipman changes versus like up here, it says or. So if we weren't sure to catch the changes that are later on, this first set of paragraphs could contradict it. I don't know if I'm making myself clear.
I guess for the purpose of getting through the density of this, maybe jump right into definitions and then we could circle back
That's a good idea.
if we feel in the next 27 minutes, right? This is our last one.
Yep.
And circle back if we feel like there needs to be some narrative or some setup.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Ken, did you have a question? Sorry, I cut you off.
It was more that, what exactly are we defining terms for? Because generally you have something that explain here's a paragraph containing 20 terms, and then below that we're defining what those terms mean. Or is this just flipped in this case?
Well, I think because if you look at that, because it's about exclusion, suspension, and expulsion, it just starts out straight with the definitions. Like, I think a couple of Shipman policies start out pretty much with just definitions,
Okay.
because then you have to refer back to that as we get through all the meat of the stuff later on. But I agree, it did feel really weird just to kind of start out without having some kind of a lead in. So I
And
like
for as old as our last one was, most of it is so broad that I think it could apply to almost anything. So even if we kept our old lead in,
that's true. Yeah.
parts of it, because all of those things are true, right? What the board encourages. Maybe the language could shift a little bit. Disciplinary measures are imposed when, disciplinary measures are required to correct rather than punish. I mean, all of those things are true.
Oh, so actually, I think what's happening here is, they're two different policies. So what you're looking at is 5144,
Oh, and the other one's 5.
and the other one is 5114, which is about exclusion, suspension, and expulsion. So that's what I was saying. 5144 actually doesn't exist in CABE or Shipman's model policy packets anymore. I think we adopted it back in 2011 or whatever, and at some point subsequently, it either got absorbed into other policies or just got dropped from their packets, and we didn't keep up with that change. So that's where I was saying perhaps we ourselves delete that policy from our packet, from our policy manual. But separately, 5114 does need to be updated. And some of the other policies that we have in place capture some of the old 5144.
Yeah, so I wonder though, because the 5144 captures discipline in general,
Yep.
right? 5114 captures discipline in general and then specifies those 3 types of discipline.
Correct.
So I'm wondering, once we get through this, perhaps the narrative or the setup, some of it from 5144 could be used to at least provide a setup to.
Oh, right. So I thought you were referencing like the 3 paragraphs that are already there at the start of 5114 that are redlined out.
So those would go, because those have,
Got
like
it.
Laura said, on page 4, they may contradict.
Yep.
5144, albeit not exact language that we would use now. For example, positive rewards, we don't really use that type of language because we don't reward actual reward, but I'm just wondering if some parts of this could still be used.
Okay. Oh, now I get it. I'm sorry. I was missing that before. So perhaps we do delete 5144, but we take elements of it and use it as the lead into the new 5114.
Yeah, possibly.
Got it. I'm sorry, I missed that. I wasn't understanding that before.
Is it? I'm sorry, I may have missed this. Is there a current 5114?
There is a current 5114. It deals with the exclusion, suspension, and expulsion. This is, now we have to update it because there've been a lot of legislative changes. Our policy, I think, is from 2011.
Right.
So we had to update it anyway. Sorry, go ahead, Ken.
So we're just going to use Shipman's policy. Just
Yeah.
Push
So
them out.
basically, exactly. So basically, what we're recommending is using Shipman's current 5114 policy. The red line version that we gave you for today is just really to show you how that changes what we currently have as our policy to make it updated for a shipment so that you could say, oh, well, why did they add that? Or why did they get rid of that? So I think perhaps to Dr. De Silva's point, if we want to just go through what we have here is 5114, take a look at some of those, see what some of those suggested changes are, and if anybody has any comments or questions about those. A lot of it looks like they just clarified definitions based on legislative changes. Obviously, they also made some changes based on the fact that we've got remote, there are some quarantine learning or remote learning or virtual learning opportunities. I mean, as we went through Summit, like there's an awfully long list of actions leading to disciplinary action. But again, seeing as this comes from the attorneys and they're the ones who typically we work with on stuff like this, I'm not going to question those too much. Some of the things that they had, I guess it's on the page 7, about like vapor products and stuff. I know we've had conversations about those last spring when we were talking about other policies. So I think some questions that I might have had around that were answered in some of those prior conversations. It feels like it's legislative stuff.
So I have a question for my learning purposes. Is an exclusion essentially an in-school suspension?
It could be, or it could be an exclusion for a temporary period of time. So a child's excluded from their classroom space. Usually a suspension is a suspension in school or out of school. We attempt to make every proactive way to keep kids in school before removing them for an out of school.
So then what would an exclusion be?
A child is removed from their class and placed in a separate class for a period of time. I think it's over 90 minutes. Is that accurate, Dr. Hanoi?
I'd have to confirm the exact timing. But it typically can be for disciplinary purposes. It also can be for the student to collect themselves and come back. So one subsumes the other, but not the other way around. So if you're in an in-school suspension, you're automatically excluded. But if you're excluded, doesn't mean it's an in-school suspension.
And if the minutes are correct, once you're 90 minutes outside of the classroom, I think it's 90 minutes, then it's considered an in-school suspension.
Right.
Can you help me on I guess it's page 11, it's Roman numeral 4, discretionary and mandatory expulsions. Can you just at a very top line level, I was getting too caught up in the weeds, I think, on that.
Where are you, Margaret? Page 11?
Sorry, it says, I think it's page 11, but it's Roman numeral 4, discretionary and mandatory expulsions.
Mm-hmm.
So we just do a lot of cross references. I was starting to get too caught up in the weeds to really kind of understand the bigger picture between.
Because there are certain items and certain reasons in which a student we must go to an expulsion hearing. And I believe many of those are listed, for example, possession of a deadly weapon. There are other reasons why we may elect to go to an expulsion hearing, but we're not mandated to do so. So it may be, for example, a number of minor offenses that result in a major offense, as opposed to a major offense,
Okay.
which were mandated. So those minor offenses, we still have the ability to say, yes, we want to go to an expulsion hearing, or no, but there are certain events in which we would be required by law to go to a mandatory expulsion hearing.
Okay, that's what I figured. It just felt weird that the may is for grades 3 to 12 inclusive, but the must is grades kindergarten to 12. It almost felt like it would be the opposite, like those little K to second graders.
because of the reasons above. So if I'm understanding your question correctly, oh yeah, I don't know why I see what your point is that why wouldn't they just say in A,
Grade,
Grades
kindergarten to 12, or I mean,
Right.
it feels weird that the harsher one is kindergarten to 12.
well, the kindergarten through 12 is because of those reasons, but I
Because of
still
those
don't
reasons, right.
understand that. I don't understand why A.
Would be, okay.
Oh, it does, actually. It makes sense. So the reasons in which may consider a recommendation for expulsion, because we would not consider
Oh.
we would not consider an expulsion for a student in kindergarten, first or second grade, unless it was those mandatory reasons below.
Got
1,
it.
2, 3. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, that clarified it. I was struggling with that one before. Okay, no, that clarifies it. Any other questions from?
Just again, from my education, on something like that, on the mandatory expulsion, if a kindergartner, five years old, 6 years old, with basic understanding of the world, comes in with their dad's, unsecured firearm, is that a justifiable punishment for a kid in that situation? But they're mandatory. It's a mandatory.
Yeah, I think that,
Or is
right.
it mandatory hearing? Not
It's a
necessarily.
mandatory, well, so it's a mandatory expulsion. Ultimately, every student has the opportunity to, well, an expulsion is an expulsion. Every student, you would come to a hearing, and then the Board of Education, I think it's 3 or more of you, need to be available for the hearing, and then you would be making the recommendation. You would either be agreeing or not agreeing.
Okay.
And then obviously we can create an agreement, which is also reflected in this policy, a stipulated agreement that would allow for an alternative to having a student be excluded from school for 12 months. And of course, development, age, all of that comes into play when, a student may have not had the capacity to understand what their actions were.
Okay.
But at minimum, you have to go to a mandatory expulsion hearing.
Sure. That makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
Assuming we were already doing, even if the policy wasn't necessarily up with some of the changes, I know in practice, we were practicing what we needed to legislatively. Was there anything else though that might have jumped out at you, Dr. De Silva, the administration in here that?
No, the only thing that was a wonder, but not necessarily that it stood out, but with the new law on cannabis, how that might impact an expulsion. And from what I understand, it just can't impact an expulsion any more than any other substance. So in other words, if you were going to expel a student for the distribution of alcohol, if you weren't going to expel the student for the distribution of alcohol, then you couldn't expel the student for the distribution of cannabis. In other words, it's an equal playing field. It cannot be treated with greater gravity than another controlled substance.
Okay.
And that, we haven't received, I know it's, we've received some guidance, but we haven't received anything firmed up on that, but that's the only thing that stood out to me there.
Anything else? Board members? So if we want to, we can go back to the idea that Dr. De Silva had mentioned at the beginning of this conversation about, do we want to, instead of going straight into definitions, do we want to think about some kind of a lead in, and in so doing, do we even want to consider elements of 5144 as part of that?
Yes.
Yeah, personally, yeah, I always like some kind of a context to it. So again, as long as it can be a broad enough statement where we don't have to worry about contradictions of what comes after, then that's.
So would it be helpful, Margaret, before our next meeting, if I give an attempt at modifying the 5144 to be a little bit more relevant to what our practices are
Mhm.
now, and then bring that back at our next meeting?
Sure, but bring it back as the lead into 5114.
Correct.
Right, yeah, okay.
So 5144 would be deleted.
Right,
Parts of 5144, the narrative, that's
Yep.
discipline, which is also included in 5114, could possibly be included. Just probably, like I said, make it a little bit more relevant.
perfect.
for today.
And can I suggest, just so that we save paper and for Cheryl's time, that perhaps we don't need to re-see 5114, the body of it, but just understand like your language that you would suggest for the lead-in. Does
Yep,
that sound good?
I agree.
All right, so that one, yeah, that one will come back to committee for our October meeting. Unless, I mean, it's up to the committee. If the committee felt strong enough about 5114 and trusted Dr. De Silva to be able to just bring it to the full board for the first read, and the committee sees the lead in at the same time, knowing that some of it's coming from language that's already here, I'd actually be fine with that.
I would too.
Okay.
Are you okay with that?
I am okay with that.
Sure. So I might,
Very subtle changes, like in the narrative in 5144, generally speaking, would be fine. I think there'd be just some small changes and then perhaps a direct statement that leads into the policy on 5114.
great.
Would it be permissible or advisable to circulate a draft of that prior to the meeting for comment, or that just procedurally that isn't how it works?
Yeah, procedurally, I don't think we can, because it would actually constitute a board meeting outside of a board meeting.
Okay. Fair
I
enough.
could share a draft with Margaret, and Margaret, you could actually take a look at it before we bring it to the full board and see if that makes sense.
Yep, that's fine.
Perfect.
That's fine. Yeah, and then committee members have the same opportunity to discuss as other board members on
Right.
that. But this way, at least this one kind of gets moving along.
And the
Yeah.
reality is it's a first read. So if the full
Right.
board has any concerns
Exactly.
about it, they can
Yep.
let us know and we can make changes before the second.
So on that topic, for the first read for the board, I mean, I know we just gave the red line version for us in committee because we roll up our sleeves, we're talking about a lot. I mean, does it make sense to actually give the what will be our adopted policy, the 5114, the shipment, without showing the red line changes, just because it's easier to read than all these scratch outs and stuff like that?
I would say only the red line. The only red line should be what Dr. De Silva is composing now.
Right, perfect.
So accept these changes and
Accept the
add
changes.
those on top of it.
I agree with that. Perfect. All right. So great. So everything's going to move forward then to the full board for first read. We have about 9 minutes. I don't know. Do we want to talk at all about what might be coming up in our next meeting, or Dr. De Silva? I know we.
Let's bang another one out. Don't we have another policy we got to bang out? Pull it up.
Well,
Pull it up on the PowerPoint.
we have 9 minutes to spare. Well, I don't know if there'll be a policy at all around vaccinations, so that's a wait and see. I know that we talked about wellness coming up at some point, if not in October, shortly thereafter. Let me see what else we had.
I think there was one that it was a board bylaw around electronic communications to be able to allow us to continue to understand how to do public, how to get the public involved with an electronic meeting.
Okay, that's good.
Yeah, there was a lot. I mean, there was a pretty active legislative session, obviously, last spring. So there's a lot of things coming down that are just legislative changes, including, remember all the anti-discrimination stuff we just did? We gotta update that again for a very little change, but I think we adopted it in June and we gotta redo it.
Yeah.
And Margaret, our team has not gone through all the legislative updates. We actually just attended a webinar with Shipman and Goodwin. So we'll actually have more.
Great.
We'll have, in fact, I think we have a meeting scheduled either this week or next week. So we'll have more to share. So if it's okay with you, I'll probably communicate with you by email
Sure.
on some things that we may need to add for October or November.
Yeah, and we'll go with you. I mean, obviously, from a prioritization standpoint, the things that you need from a, getting work done standpoint, we will prioritize that for you.
Perfect.
Okay. All
All right.
right. Well, thank you, everybody. Very productive meeting. We like that.